Well, greetings and welcome back. Welcome to another episode of Travel Without a Cause. This is Matt, and got an exciting one for you today, I think. It's a little bit better weather than we've had the last couple of vlogs, which is kind of exciting, and which means warmer weather. But hey, that dark, cloudy, rainy, misty weather is not always the happiest of of weather types, I guess you could say. So today we're going to be exploring, and I'm going to be telling you guys a story about Henri Bendel and the significance of who he is and how he's tied to Lafayette, Louisiana. And I got permission to walk around the property where one of his properties stood, and I'll explain more about that in a second as I tell the story and all that. And so I'll be showing you around and kind of telling the story, showing some pictures and such. And so I hope you enjoy it. And without further ado, here we go. All right, guys. So here we are in Bendel Gardens in Lafayette, Louisiana. And like I said, I got permission to walk around the property and show you guys around. And I'll tell you all about the significance of this property as we explore it. It's quite beautiful. Right in the middle of it's a beautiful oak tree. And a couple of other, looks like a big magnolia tree, possibly, right in front of us. So, Mr. Henri Willis Bendel, born January 22nd, 1868, and died March 22nd, 1936, was a very famous hat maker and women's clothing / fashion designer in New York City, mainly of the early 1900s, and was very prominent up until the closure of all of the stores in January of 2019. But he's from here. He's from Lafayette, Louisiana, native of Lafayette. And his family came here as immigrants back in the 1800s. And when Mr. Bendel when he purchased this property, I don't want to go too much out of order chronologically here, but when he did buy this property, he purposely had magnolia trees. It might have been these exact magnolia trees and the live oak tree planted here. He wanted those featured on his property, or on the property he was buying and building a lodge on, essentially. And I'm so glad to see that, assuming that these are the same ones that he planted. I mean, they look like they could be, because they're quite large. For a magnolia tree, those are pretty big. That they're still here. So yeah, I guess I'll start telling you guys a little bit about Mr. Bendel here. So businessman, fashion designer, philanthropist, basically founded an upscale women's fashion company in New York City. And over 100 years later, I said up until January of 2019, they remained in business on Fifth Avenue, like the Fifth Avenue, as in like Saks Fifth Avenue and all of those, you know, all the clothing and fashion design and all that, all the mecca industry staple names that are in the industry that are on Fifth Avenue in New York City to this day. He was one of the main ones, in fact, one of the first ones. And he's from right here in Lafayette, Louisiana. But born in Vermilionville, which is, if you see my other vlogs, Vermilionville is what Lafayette, Louisiana used to be called, to a Mary and William Louis Bendel, both immigrants. The dad was from Austria, and the mom was from Prussia, which is a part of what, you know, used to be in Germany. His father died when Henry was only 6 years old. And his mom went on to be a prominent business person, maybe where Henry got his feel for it, or maybe he's, you know, where he got his know-how from for business and marketing and all that. And because his mom ran quite a few businesses. She operated a retail furniture outlet, a drugstore, dry goods store, and an undertaking parlor, of all things. here in Vermilionville. Cool little bridge right there. That had to be part of the original property. That's pretty nice. And if you look over there, right over there, my very first vlog was of the Dollar/Center Cinema. That's where it stood, right there. Right there. Pretty cool, huh? See, all my stuff ties together. Not really, but. So his mom, after his dad passed away when he was only 6, his mom remarried in 1878 to a man named Benjamin Falk, who became one of the most successful Lafayette businessmen, or Vermilionville businessmen of the time. And so Henry was kind of, I could see him being groomed into all this stuff, you know. You know, if you have a mom or a parent that's involved in and as successful as they are into something like that, it's easy to see how they got a knack for it. Which I think is fascinating when you research people and how they got successful, or, you know, and you see them and you find out that they were groomed or they came up in an atmosphere where it was like that, you know, or around people like that, especially when it's your own parents. And so, she, you know, like I said, his mom remarried. They operated a dry goods store above what ended up being Falk's Opera House, which was like basically still to this day the only opera house that's ever existed here. And it was like, you know, typical vaudeville and opera entertainment and stuff like that. Henry went on to go to college at a Jesuit-run St. Charles College in Grand Coteau, Louisiana, which is about 20 or so miles north of Vermilionville or Lafayette. And shortly after he graduated, he actually converted to Christianity, which has really nothing to do with this vlog, but it's an interesting fact because his parents are both immigrants from Prussia and Austria, so I don't know what their religions were, but so yeah. So in the meantime, Henry started a millinery shop, which is apparently, I didn't know this, but it's like when you make hats and such. It's called a millinery, if I'm pronouncing that right, in Morgan City, which is about 50 or 60 miles south of Lafayette, way down there on the coast, basically on the bottom of Louisiana. And so he and his wife Blanche moved to New York City after his millinery shop burned down. It actually burned down, so they decided, hey, let's just go big now. They went to New York City, and that was around, they got married in 1894. Now Blanche died along with their child in childbirth in 1895, which is super sad. I mean, just a year after marriage, you lose your wife and your child in childbirth. And he never remarried after that. Never got remarried after that. And Blanche, a little side fact, Blanche was a Lehman, as in the last name was Lehman, and of the Lehman Brothers, which some of you might have, I'm sure, have heard of. Family-run business over the years, and everybody, you know, especially the older generation, knows of the Lehman Brothers. So she probably came from wealth and prominence, I'm sure. And so she's from that family, and they got married, and then they, like I said, sadly she died a year later, and he never got remarried after that. So, but he stayed in New York City, and he used his skills, basically, you know, what he's learned over the years and from his millinery shop and all that, and he set up shop on 9th Avenue in Greenwich Village. That was his first shop or whatever, which catered to the wealthy, you know, making hats for the wealthy in New York City. And so did that for a while, and actually expanded into making dresses at the time, like women's dresses. As far as I know, and from the research I've done, it was solely all of his business and empire was based off of women's fashion. I don't know anything, I haven't read anything or found anything that had to do with anything that was men's fashion or anything. So and being that he was French speaking, he used that influence, or, you know, whatever, he enhanced the store's reputation by importing fashions from Paris. And I guess he had what you'd call the clout, because he's like, oh, he speaks French, he's French, so that gave him maybe more of an edge over competition. And so kept on doing that, kept on trucking, kept on growing. And in 1907, and I'll show a picture here, what he was really famous for overall to this day, looking back, if you see any of his retail stores, which aren't around anymore, they closed them all in 2019, but his classic and iconic brown and white hat boxes. He started doing that in 1907. That's when those came around. And that's his staple. That became his iconic brand image. And so he stuck with that. And so, yeah, 1907. And then in 1913, about 6 years later, he built an 8-story women's store at number 10 West 57th Street. And around that time, or you know, maybe because of him, or maybe he was, I don't know if he was the first one there, and then other companies started seeing where he was and they wanted to set up shop there too, or whatever the case was. But there was other fashion houses that soon opened nearby him, and it became known as the La Rue de la Paix of New York. So basically, like, that was like maybe the Fifth Avenue before Fifth Avenue was around. And so front runner for sure, you know, like kind of ahead of his time. And it seems like from the research I've done, like I said, it seems like he was the first one. And then other people and other companies and businesses started following his lead. And I guess they were on to something and they ran with it. Some more magnolia trees here. Seems like there's more magnolia trees than anything else. Big, beautiful, tall pine trees for sure. And then this huge live oak that sits right in the middle, with the swing underneath it and everything. Let's go take a look at that. Now, his flagship store, over the years, the one that was the most prominent and regarded as his flagship main store on Fifth Avenue, was at 712 Fifth Avenue, as you see here. So in 1916, Henry built a 12-acre waterfront mansion in Kings Point, Long Island, which was actually designed by Henry Otis Chapman, who also built the West 57th Street store. And this is, like, you know, this is a private residence for Henry. This isn't a business or anything. So he ended up selling that in 1923 to, get this, the automaker Walter Chrysler. But I thought that was pretty interesting. And today it's known, that same building, that the one that Chrysler bought from Bendel, is known as Wiley Hall, and it serves as an admin building at the U.S. Merchant Marine Academy, if any of you are familiar with that. And then finally, this is coming full circle for you guys. Like I said, we're here in Bendel Gardens in Lafayette, Louisiana. Pretty much dead center South Lafayette. In 1927, which is the year my grandfather was born, Henri Bendel acquired 179.9 acres along the Vermilion River, which is where we are now. So the history of this neighborhood, it's called Bendel Gardens now, and it's been that for years. And before that, it was called Walnut Grove Plantation, and was owned by John Sosthene Mouton and Charlotte O'Deed, if I'm saying that right, Mouton, who was a daughter of Governor Alexander Mouton. Now, we talked about him a couple vlogs before now. So he was the son of Jean Mouton, who was a massive landowner, or had tons and tons of land that he owned here through Spanish grants, and basically set up shop here in what was Vermilionville at the time, and what was actually called Manchac Trading Post before that. And so so the spring of 1863, I'm talking, this is the history of this area, this property, all these acres here. In 1863, General Banks, this during the Civil War, waged his campaign in the area during the Civil War. Federal troops seized Walnut Grove and forced out Mrs. Mouton with her 6 children. and burned down the plantation and all surrounding buildings. And this was all in this neighborhood. So the property was later owned by Dr. Percy M. Gerard and M. Eloy Gerard, whom Bendel purchased the property from in 1927. So that little backstory there from the Civil War, and then it was later owned by a doctor, and then it was sold to Henry. I wonder how old this swing is. Could very well not be that old. This could just be because it sits underneath a big oak tree. But it looks pretty old to me. Pretty nice too, huh? So yeah, so Henry he acquired this massive piece of land in which we are standing in right now. And around that same time, and we'll drive by that house, he built and lived in what's now called the French House, and is owned by the University of Louisiana. And it's about a mile or so away, a mile or two away from here. He had a deep love for everything French. And that was shown in, you know, his business when he got his goods and stuff from Paris and all that. And I'm sure living here, especially at that time, was such a strong Cajun French and general French concentration here in this area. I'm sure he loved that. And it's probably a great vacation for him from the hustle and bustle of New York City, you know, especially who he was and how prominent he was. I'm sure it was a fast-paced lifestyle, no doubt. And so while he's building this big, massive house in Long Island, he built and lived in a house here so he could stay here. And then now, finally, I can explain what this piece of property right here that we've been trolling around for the last few minutes, 20 minutes or so. In this lot right here on the corner of Marguerite and Bendel, like I said, when we pulled in, that's Marguerite right there, if you can see the sign over there. That's the entrance to Bendel Gardens. Oh, excuse me. Sorry about that. That was the original entrance. And right here stood his caretaker's house, which was called the Lodge, on this big piece of property. This has got to be maybe probably 2 acres, I'd say, something like that. And the lodge stood here. Yeah, and I'll see, you know, you can see the picture here I'm posting of what it looked like. And his caretaker stayed here while Henry lived in the French house. So yeah, now we're driving over to the French house, which is the house that Henri Bendel built and lived in while his other house was being built. And a while ago or earlier, I said something about his Long Island house. He sold his Long Island house, and after that fact, he bought the Bendel Gardens area and all that. So I'm not too sure which house was being built while he was staying in the French house. I just can't figure that one out. But however, we're gonna go take a look at the French house, and I'll tell you a little bit more about it when we get there. So yeah, here it is, folks. It's beautiful, isn't it? And like I said earlier, it was purchased by University of Louisiana in 1955. But it was built by Henri Bendel so he could live there while his house was being built. And again, I'm not too sure. I couldn't pinpoint exactly which house was being built at the time he built this one to stay in and lodge in and all that stuff. But further research shows that it was built for a Mr. Myrtle Meyer and his wife, Miss Louise Bendel Meyer, who was a sister of Henry. So it seems like he built this overall for his sister and her husband, and he just lived here temporarily until his house was built, and assumingly he just moved into his house once this was done. Very stately house though, beautiful. And here's the sign in the front: La Maison Française Welcome Center, University of Louisiana, Lafayette. We're not going to spend too much time here, but thought I'd walk around and maybe show you guys, or at least show you the front of it. And I mentioned Mr. Myrtle and his wife, who is Henry's sister. And the place we're going to next is the cemetery. It's a Jewish cemetery. And I mentioned earlier also that I wasn't too sure of what religion his parents were, but I'm starting to believe that maybe they were Jewish because they're buried in a Jewish cemetery all together, kind of like a family plot. Henry's not buried there with them. He's buried in New York. And I'll get into that too. I'll talk about that when we get there. But his sister and her husband and Henry's parents are all buried at the Jewish cemetery here. So I just wanted to make that clarification. So I guess it is sort of significant that Henry converted to Christianity after college because he was assumingly brought up Jewish, which is pretty interesting actually. Okay, so we're walking towards the Jewish cemetery now in Lafayette. And we talked about Jean Mouton a lot. He's a landowner who got all the land from the Spanish grants, and his son Alexander Mouton ended up being the governor of Louisiana. Remember all that? Where earlier we talked about Alexander's daughter, Charlotte Mouton, who was one of the original, I guess, owners or people who lived at Walnut Grove Plantation, which ended up being Bendel Gardens later on. Well, the Moutons actually donated, or I guess you could say donated the land for this Jewish cemetery. And it was their doing that established this cemetery that we're about to walk into right now. And here we go, folks. It's a front gate to the cemetery. Heavy gate too. Oh, and there it is to the right. This is the tomb and beautiful artwork that Henry designed and made specifically for his parents. It's quite large too. And it's of a mother holding two wreaths, one that says mother, one that says father. And up there, like she's looking up at an angel. And let's see if I can read that. Arise, shine, for thy light has come, and the glory of the Lord is risen upon thee. Oh, here we go. So Myrtle Meyer was who was married, ended up, and Myrtle's a man. He married Louise Bendel Meyer. And Louise Bendel was Henry's sister, who he built the French house for. And if you look over here, William Bendel, who's Henry's father, born 1837, died 1874, Benjamin Falk was the man that Henry's mother remarried to. And Mary herself is buried here too. So she's buried here with both of her husbands. You don't see that too often, do you? So she died in 1915. And over here, it says William Levy and Isaac Bendel. I'm not too sure if that's maybe Henry's, well, it couldn't have been his son, maybe his nephew or something. I'm not too sure. It says, to the glory of God and sacred memory of our beloved mother, Mary Bendel Falk, 1839 to 1915. So there you have it, folks. I hope you enjoyed that. I surely did. I was able to gather quite a bit of information through my research on this topic today, so that always makes me happy. I think it's always easier to tell a story when you have more information, and I hope I was able to really portray that information to you and tell a decent story about it, and that you were able to see it through my eyes my camera lens today, you know. I think Mr. Bendel's an interesting guy. I think his history, his family history, and how things connect between the Moutons and the Bendels and all that. And then being able to see, you know, that piece of land that's still vacant where that lodge stood, and then getting to see the French house, and then getting to see this right here, this beautiful memorial for the tomb of his mom and his stepfathers and sisters and such. And again, it's so cool to know that somebody that prominent, you know, somebody in New York, Fifth Avenue, one of the pioneers of that type in that industry, is from this city, you know, Lafayette, Louisiana. And I just think that's a beautiful thing. And so I hope you're liking the material, guys. I hope the quality's getting better. I know it is, because like I said, I'm getting the visuals are getting better with the gimbal. The microphone that's on the way is going to improve the sound much better. I'm not going to sound so blocky and blotchy anymore. And with that, like I said, please, you know, show your love if you like it. Subscribe to it. Share it with your friends. You know, watching in front of a campfire on Friday nights or something. I don't know. But like I said, like, subscribe, comment, hit me up, give me ideas. I'm all about local stuff. If you have information on this or things that you would like me to vlog, let me know. And like with that, I guess I'll just hang it up here and say I'll see you on the next one. Bye, folks.